The arrest of Prophet Walter Magaya, founder of Prophetic Healing and Deliverance, PHD Ministries, has sent shockwaves through Zimbabwe's religious and political landscape. Magaya, a charismatic figure with millions of followers, faces serious charges of rape and fraud, yet his incarceration has paradoxically amplified his influence, as evidenced by the record-breaking turnout at his flagship event, the Night of Turnaround. This development raises critical questions. Will Magaya secure bail? How will President Emmerson Mnangagwa navigate the optics of massive crowds rallying behind a non-political figure? And what does this mean for Zimbabwe's socio-political stability? On November 1st, 2025, Walter Magaya was arrested by a Zimbabwe Republic Police ZRP crack team on 5 counts of rape and 13 counts of fraud. The allegations span from 2013 to 2018, involving sexual abuse of congregants and fraudulent housing schemes through his companies Planet Africa and Yada Connect. Victims reportedly lost millions of dollars in promised housing projects that never materialized. The charges are grave, placing Magaya in the category of high-risk offenders under Zimbabwean law. Magaya's initial plea for release was dismissed by magistrate Gofa, who ruled that over-detention beyond 48 hours did not justify freedom. Bail for rape charges falls under the third schedule, requiring high court jurisdiction. Magaya remains in custody, with hearings scheduled for November 13th, rape, and November 18th, fraud. His wife, Tendai, was granted bail of $500, but Magaya's prospects remain uncertain. The Night of Turnaround, a show of strength. Despite Magaya's incarceration, the Night of Turnaround, a signature event of PHD Ministries, went ahead on November 7, 2025. Historically, this gathering attracts tens of thousands from Zimbabwe and neighboring countries. This year, attendance reportedly surged beyond previous records, fueled by solidarity and the perception that Magaya's arrest is a spiritual trial rather than a criminal matter. Prominent figures like Prophet Passion Java publicly endorsed Magaya, pledging financial support and urging congregants to attend in numbers greater than ever before. The event's success underscores the resilience of charismatic movements and their ability to mobilize even under legal scrutiny. For Mnangagwa's administration, such mass mobilization outside state control is politically sensitive, especially amid economic hardships and growing public discontent. President Emmerson Mnangagwa has historically maintained cordial ties with Magaya. In 2023, Mnangagwa commissioned Magaya's Heart Stadium in Harare, praising him for visionary projects. This relationship complicates the optics of Magaya's arrest. On one hand, Mnangagwa must uphold the rule of law. On the other, he risks alienating a vast religious constituency if the case is perceived as politically motivated. ZANU-PF has long been wary of large crowds outside its control. Religious gatherings of this magnitude can morph into alternative power centers, challenging state dominance. Analysts suggest Mnangagwa will tread carefully, avoiding overt support for Magaya while ensuring the case does not escalate into a populist movement that destabilizes the regime. Legal analysis: will Magaya get bail? Under Zimbabwean law, rape is classified as a third schedule offense, meaning bail can only be granted by the High Court. Magistrate Gofa explicitly ruled out bail at the lower court level. Magaya's defense team plans to apply to the High Court, but prospects are dim in the short term. Factors against bail include severity of charges. Rape and large-scale fraud carry heavy penalties. Risk of witness interference. Magaya's influence over congregants raises concerns. Public interest and optics. Releasing him could spark backlash and unrest. However, Zimbabwe's judiciary has historically shown flexibility under political pressure. If Mnangagwa perceives prolonged detention as destabilizing, especially with growing crowds and clergy solidarity, behind-the-scenes lobbying could tilt the scales toward conditional bail. Social dynamics, faith versus state. Magaya's arrest highlights the tension between popular religion and state authority. In Zimbabwe, charismatic churches wield immense social capital, often rivaling formal institutions. PHD Ministries frames Magaya's ordeal as persecution, fueling loyalty and reinforcing narratives of spiritual warfare. This dynamic complicates governance as the state must balance legal enforcement with respect for religious freedoms. The surge in attendance at the night of turnaround signals a broader trend. Faith-based mobilization as a form of socio-political expression. For many Zimbabweans, churches offer hope amid economic despair, a role traditionally occupied by political movements. This overlap creates fertile ground for conflict when religious leaders face legal challenges. Political risks for Mnangagwa. Mnangagwa's administration faces a delicate balancing act. Containment of unrest. Large gatherings could morph into anti-government protests if mishandled. Perception management. The regime must avoid appearing to persecute religion while asserting judicial independence. Factional exploitation. Opposition parties may weaponize the saga to question ZANU-PF's ties to controversial figures. With elections looming in 2028, Mnangagwa cannot afford parallel mobilization that erodes ZANU-PF's dominance. Expect increased surveillance of religious events and possible regulatory reforms targeting mega churches. Likely scenarios for Zimbabwe short-term, next 3 to 6 months. Legal proceedings intensify, more complainants may emerge, expanding the case beyond Zimbabwe. Church mobilization. PHD Ministries will frame Magaya's ordeal as persecution, fueling loyalty. Political balancing act. Mnangagwa will avoid direct involvement but may influence judicial timelines. Medium term, 6 to 12 months. Bail outcome. If granted, it will likely come with strict conditions: passport surrender, reporting requirements, and a hefty bond. Impact on religious sector. Expect regulatory reforms on financial transparency and clergy accountability. Factional politics. Opposition may exploit the saga to question ZANU-PF's integrity. Long-term, beyond 2026. Trial and verdict. A conviction could dismantle PHD Ministries. An acquittal could reinforce perceptions of impunity. Socio-political ripple. The episode underscores Zimbabwe's complex interplay of faith, politics, and law. Broader implications. Magaya's arrest is more than a criminal case. It's a stress test for Zimbabwe's governance model. It pits rule of law versus popular religion. Can the judiciary assert independence against mass loyalty? State authority versus alternative power centers. Large gatherings spotlight the latent political influence of churches. Mnangagwa's stability strategy. With elections on the horizon, the regime must contain potential unrest without alienating religious constituencies. Will Magaya get bail? Not immediately. The High Court may consider it later, but only under strict conditions and after political risk assessments. Meanwhile, his incarceration paradoxically amplifies his influence, creating a delicate balancing act for Mnangagwa, who must contain potential unrest without alienating millions of believers. Magaya's saga is a microcosm of Zimbabwe's broader challenges, navigating the intersection of law, faith, and politics in a society where charismatic leaders command loyalty that rivals the state. The coming months will reveal whether Zimbabwe can uphold judicial integrity while preserving social harmony, or whether this case will ignite a crisis that reshapes the nation's political landscape. Thank you for watching, like, share, and subscribe.